Hello, welcome to this episode. We're going to talk about monitoring setup, particularly on how to create your own layout for surround sound. Now, there's plenty of videos online on how to set up your surround monitors, but the question is where the instructions says it's going to be around 110 degrees, where is 110 degrees on your wall or on your stand? So today we're going to use a little bit of simple math using our calculator, and we're also going to talk about delay compensation and loss of dB over distance. So stay tuned. Cheers. This is basically what we will cover today. We will talk first about simple stereo setup, because that is kind of explains the basic idea of everything we're going to do today. And then we're going to look at 7.0 speaker layout, equidistant and orthogonal. The sub is something I will return to in the end, but the same principles apply to everything. So that's why what to talk about for the 7.0 also applies for 5.1, 7.16, and so on. In the end, after setting up your speakers, we're also going to talk about calculating your dB loss over distance and how powerful monitors you need. Now, we're not going to talk about watts or kind of the electronics of it, but we're going to talk about how much dB output your monitor must be able to produce. And finally, we're going to talk about calculating time delay over time. Now, there's a lot of programs, hardware, software, where this can be done automatically. But if you can't afford those fancy, expensive equipment, you might as well just do it on your phone, for instance. Now, to do this, we're going to use some simple mathematical principles, namely trigonometry, Pythagoras, talking about the hypotenuse, and loss of dB and time delay. During the entire presentation, these will be on the side, and I will point to which one I'm using. Now, a short note on math. Not everyone is comfortable with math, and I'm not brilliant either. However, when it comes to applied mathematics in situations like this, where it says tan, for instance, or cos or sin in trigonometry, we don't actually need to know what they mean or what they do. What we need to know is where to find it on our calculator. So basically, if you know how to put it into calculator and you know which value represents what number, or what symbol, then you're actually good to go, because then you know what to put where of the data that you have. You put it in following the principle, press enter, and you get the reply from the calculator. So although we use a lot of math in this video, it's not a mathematical lecture. We just use the formulas to put data into a calculator and get the response we need. So in short, in this case, trigonometry will help us decide the length of a triangle. All these do the same thing, basically, but we get different results. So for instance, we have, of this triangle, we have the theta, the angle that we are using to calculate. We also have the adjacent side, which is connected to the angle. And we have the opposite side, which is on the opposite side of the theta angle. So we can see here, for instance, here if we divide opposite with the hypotenuse, if you know those one of those distances, we can use the sin to calculate the other. Same goes for the adjacent and hypotenuse. Then we use cos. And finally, we can use the tan to use the numbers we have for either the opposite or the adjacent side. This combined with Pythagoras' theorem, in which we know two of the sides, and we can calculate the hypotenuse. So what we basically do then is we take one side square plus the other side squared equals the hypotenuse squared. And after that, we just need to take the square root from it. We can do exactly the same thing here, just by putting it like this. We have the same here as we had, and just applied the squared into the formula. So to some it may look advanced, but it really isn't. And you can put it into your calculator. So again, this is a formula that you don't need to understand the math. You just need to put this into the calculator and know which number goes where. So in this case, by knowing these angles, we can calculate the hypotenuse. And that is basically it for this entire video. We're going to calculate the distance of triangles in a certain direction, so that when we look to the side and know that our one speaker should be, for instance, at 110 degrees, we know exactly where to place it and what happens when we do so. The two final ones here, just going to present them quickly here, but we will return to them. So what you need to think of right now is the trigonometry and Pythagoras. However, the loss of dB, I'm not going to use a lot of time to explain the formula here, but basically 20 log, just put it into your calculator. In the parentheses, 1 represents 1 meter, and d is the distance we are measuring. So for instance, if we are calculating how much dB do I lose over 10 meters, we put 10 in there, and then we get the result. For time delay, I have used 343 meters. I'm using metrical here, as you may already have noticed. 343 meters is the time travels approximately around 20 degrees Celsius. Of course, it will alter up and down. In this case, I'm not going to be that specific. 343 will be specific enough. In this case, we take the distance between 2 points, divide it by 343, and then we get seconds. And if you take that result times 1000, we get a millisecond. So to do this, you can use, of course, pen and paper, or whatever you like to do, iPad, we are modern. You need a calculator. It could be on your phone, could be a physical one, doesn't matter, as long as it has trigonometry functions. That is, that if you look into your phone, you should find buttons for sin, cos, and tan. And if they have that, they also have the other stuff. I'm pretty sure. Of course, I cannot promise for everyone, but I'm pretty sure. So, starting first with the basic principle that most of us already know for a 2.0 setup, we're now talking about equidistant monitoring. So, the distance between our ear and the monitor is the same on both sides and is the same between the speakers. So let's say today we're going to operate with 90 centimeters. So in this case, that would be 90, 90, 90. What makes this interesting now is if we divide this by 2, we have 2 right angle triangles. We already said that we are operating with 90 centimeters. Then we know the hypotenuse, and we know that this distance here is the same. This is also 90, but we divide it in 2 because we cut a line in the straight middle. So 90 divided by 2 equals 45. So we actually know 2 sides already. If you remember here talking about adding 2 sides to get the hypotenuse, that means that if we know the hypotenuse on one side, we can take the hypotenuse minus the one side to get the other side squared. So this is what I'm doing here. We know 90 squared minus 45 squared, and the root of that is 78 centimeters, approximately. I've rounded everything up to the nearest whole number. Then we have all the distances here. 90 centimeters between our ears and the speakers, and 78 centimeters to the center between them. Now we could also use the same information here, the 90 and 45, and use trigonometry to calculate the same side, because now we know the opposite here, 45, and we want to find the adjacent, and we know the angle, which is always 30 in this perfect relationship here. So using the tan, we put that into the calculator as this, 45 divided by tan 30 equals 78. So we get the same number, which means that in this case you have two ways of calculating, either by Pythagoras theorem or trigonometry. When we're talking about multi-channel setups, whatever it may be, 5.1, 7.1.6, or 3D, we're using the exact same principles all over. The only difference is that we do it multiple times. And that is what we're going to do now when we're going to talk about the 7.0 setup. We are talking about left, right in front of us, a center in the middle. We're talking about side speakers, side surround, and rear surround. In this case, it is easy to place the center speaker. It goes just right in front of us at the same distance as the other, because now we are talking about equidistant, which means that drawing a circle around us, all speakers should be on the edge of the circle, because the circle is equal distance to all directions. That is also why it's easy to start with equidistant before we talk about orthogonal later on. So simple enough, we have placed the left, right, and center. Now the question is where to place the others. Now there are different suggestions moving around. For instance, Dolby suggests that the left, right should be somewhere between 30 or 22 degrees. The side surrounds should be 90 to 110 degrees. And the rear surround should be 120, 135, as in different documents, to 150 degrees. What to go for depends on your listening position, your room, your acoustics, a lot of factors, your preference, what you're mixing for instance. But in this case, I'm going to just have one number for us to calculate on. I'm going to place my side surrounds on 110. That is for the simple reason that if I place them at 90 degrees and I sit with a director on my side listening to the music, one of us is masking one speaker for the other. So that's why I want my side speakers a little bit behind me, so they can hit both our ears. Simple enough. And because I have the side speakers a little bit on the rear side, I also move my rear surround speakers a bit more to the rear to have a more even distribution behind me, so that the surrounds don't end up in the same place. So just for this example, I'm going to use 110 for the side surrounds and 150 for the rear surrounds. And we're talking about degrees then, so 150 degrees from the center line. Now, if you were to do this in a physical room, I would also just bring some tape or whatever and just draw a line on the floor so you have that to measure from. Because the beauty of this is that if you have the calculated distances of all speakers, then you don't need to guess where 110 degrees is, because you know the opposite side and the adjacent side, so you can just go back that distance following the line and just straight out to the left, you can actually place it just by using a ruler or whatever. So that is actually the nice side of doing it like this. It's overly complicated, some may say. Yes, it may be. Just place it where it sounds good, so others may say. Yes, of course, you can do that. But in my experience working in media composition and post-production, the details do matter. So, but particularly when you don't work in a big, expensive sound stage, but you need to adopt and use what you have and gain control, then actually having that full mathematical control of all your placement makes a better tool for decision. At least that was my experience. So to me, at least, I find this very worthwhile doing. Moving on, starting with the rear speakers. I said we were talking about 150 degrees. Now a full circle is 360 degrees. A half circle is 180 degrees, which means a straight line here. So from here to here is 180 degrees. So basically 180 degrees. That produces some interesting numbers, because if we take 180, which is the straight line we are sitting on, minus 150, which is the angle we want, we are left with 30 degrees. And because we're talking about equidistant, we see that the situation we get here is a mirrored version of what we've already done for the left and right. So in an equidistant, we can use the same numbers we have here, just take it to the opposite side. So actually just moving our head to the other side and following the straight line we have taped on the floor, and use the same numbers. So from that floor tape, we go 45 centimeters to the left and 90 centimeters from our position. Then we know that the rear surround is placed at an equidistant 150 degrees. Let's move on to the side surrounds. We're going to use the same kind of logic here. We talked about having it at 110 degrees. So using the same symbol, using the same reasoning, 180 minus 110 equals 70. So this angle then is 70 degrees. One would now think that we could jump straight into using trigonometry to find out the other side, but we need to do one more step, because this side is not the theta side here that is used for the trigonometry. So we need to find out what this angle is. And now it is just simple to know that this side, or that this angle, this angle, this angle always adds up to 180. So there are our numbers. So 180 minus 70 minus 90 degrees equals 20 degrees. So now we have our theta, that is 20 degrees. We also know the hypotenuse, which is 90. Now it enables us to use the sin function, because we have the hypotenuse and the theta, and we want to calculate the opposite. So what you can plot into your calculator then is sin 20, which is the degree, times 90, which is the hypotenuse, is 30. So on our tape line here, in the center of our listening position, we can measure 30 centimeters back, make a mark, and that should be in line with both speakers. Now we have 90 and 30. We need to know the distance of the adjacent side. Then we go back to Pythagoras and we plot in at the same time. We have the hypotenuse, 90 minus 30 squared, and the root of that is 85. So from our listening positions on our tape, 30 centimeters back, 85 centimeters straight out to the side. And there should be our left and right side surrounds. We could also use trigonometry, but I used the hypotenuse or the Pythagorean at this moment here. So that's basically it for an equidistant monitor setup. Another reason that I should disclose why I use 110 for the side surround is not only because of the listening position and masking, but also because now I can use my setup also for 5-1, just skipping the rear surrounds, and I have a 5-1 setup. So with the same speaker configuration, it's easy to switch between 5-1 and 7-1, for instance. Or Atmos, just taking out the height speakers as well. Now, let's say our room is rectangular and we want to place all our speakers on the wall. Then it goes without saying that we can't have equidistant monitoring if all the speakers go on the wall in a rectangular room. But we want to maintain the same angles. We're going to use exactly the same math as we did before. It's just going to be a little bit more individual per speaker, but it's the same principles. In terms of this example here, I have decided that my layout here is 2.5 meters wide and 3.5 meters long. And the reason why I have those numbers is that according to the Norwegian cinema guidelines on how to build a cinema theater, the length of the room should be around 1.4 times the width of the room. So that is where I got the numbers from. Now, in this case, we're talking about mounting your speakers to your wall. So the size of the room is actually the size of the speaker layout. But should your room be bigger and your layout be smaller than the room, we're doing the same math. It's just that the lines here does not represent the walls. It just represents the boundary of your speaker layout. But it's the same stuff. Also, according to Dolby Studio guidelines, we should place our mixing position somewhere 50% to 70% distance in the room, which means that we have the length times, in this case I use 0.62, which gives us a distance from our listening to position to the front wall of 2.2 meters, which also means that the distance from our listening position to the rear wall is 3.5 minus 2.2. But we'll return to that. But actually then now we have distance to all sides of the room. Same goes for the sides. Our listening position, we're sitting in the middle of the room, which means that the distance between our position and the side walls are half the distance of the width of the room. Now, let's go for the fun stuff. Starting off here with the front, left, center, right. The center one is simple. We have the distance here already calculated because we're sitting at 0.62 times the length of the room, which is 2.2. So it goes straight in front of us at 2.2 meters. The left surround is calculated using Pythagorean theorem because we have the 2.2 here. We also know that half the distance of the width, 2.5, is 1.25. So we can actually use these sides to calculate the hypotenuse, which is the distance between our ear and our left speaker. In this case, of course, in a real studio, these speakers would perhaps be more into the room, a little bit less angle. But we stick to our mathematical example here to make it simple, 30 degrees, which means that our speakers are a little bit outside the room here or side mounted. So bear with me, please. Plotting this in, we have 2.2 squared plus 1.25 squared equals a number which we take the root square of, and then we get 2.5. So now we also know the distance between these ones. So 3 down, 4 to go. Now for the rear speakers, we have basically the information we need right now, because we know the distance from our listening position to the rear wall, which was the length of the room minus the distance from our listening position and the front wall. And that, ladies and gentlemen, 3.5 minus 2.2 is 1.3. So we know that the adjacent side is 1.3, and we know that the angle we want is 30 degrees. And bada bing, bada boom, trigonometry. Now we can use the tan function, and into a calculator we will plot tan 30 times 1.3 equals 0.75. So at the center position, let's say again we have taped a line over the floor at the center. From that center we go 0.75 meters to the left, and there is our left rear surround. From the center line, 0.75 meters to the right, there is our right rear surround. We also know that using Pythagoras theorem, we have one side to the other, so that one squared plus that one squared, and the root of that is 1.5 meters. Now, that may be an unnecessary number because we know where the speaker goes, but at the end of the presentation, you will see why this matters. Now, for the side surrounds, we're still operating with the same angles. So in the previous example, we calculated that we had 70 degrees angle here, which was 180 minus 110. 180 then minus 90 minus 70 was 20 degrees. We've already done the math, so I'm just skipping through. Then we know that we have the theta 20 degrees, and we know our listening position and the width of the room. So the width of the room was 2.5 divided by 2, and there we have the adjacent side. So again, using the tan with the adjacent side to calculate the opposite side, we can plot into our calculator tan 20 degrees times 1.25 equals 0.45. So from our listening position, following the tape in the center of the floor, we go back 45 centimeters. And from there, we just go straight to the side, because we have wall-mounted speakers, and there we have our side surrounds at a distance of 1.32. Because now that we have the opposite and the adjacent side, we can also calculate the hypotenuse. So 1.25 times is a squared plus 0.45 squared, and the root of that is 1.32. And there we are, ladies and gentlemen. All our speakers are now wall-mounted-ish, except for the physical problem of the left-right front speakers. Again, please bear with me. And we are almost done. However, let's return to the hypotenuses that we talked about. The distances from our listening position to each speaker. Now we can use these numbers to calculate the dB loss and the millisecond delay. Because when we measure the listening position, in this case we're talking about cinematic formats, having a monitoring level at the listening position of 85 dB C weighted. But that means that is the measured amount where we sit. which means that we also need to calculate for the dB loss by distance. So the monitors that are furthest away from us needs to play louder than those right next to us to measure the same number at the same position. So that is the first thing we're going to do. Now we go to the 20 log 1 divided by d, the distance. Again, we don't need to understand what it means, only that 1 represents 1 meter, and we divide by the distance in meters. So what we do then is we use the 20 log and we put in the distance. So from our listening position to the left front speaker, we take 20 log 1 divided by 2.5. And then we get -8, which means that originating from here to our position, the speaker will lose 8 dB of gain. So to get 105 dB at our listening position, the speaker here must add 8 more dB to produce it. Now let's do the same for all the other speakers. 20 log 1 divided by 2.2 equals -6.8. The same for 1.32 equals 2.4 dB minus, and for 1.5 minus 3.5 dB. Now again, I can't do this in my head. I barely understand it, but if you put it into your calculator, you will get the result. So write 20 log parentheses 1 divided by and the distance, the hypotenuse, from your position to the speaker. This applies to, of course, monitoring, but it also applies to live sound or whatever. And then you get the dB loss. So in order for our position to read the correct numbers, the left and right speaker must be able to produce no less than 130 dB. The center speaker no less than 111.8 dB. The side surrounds 107.4 dB. And the rear surrounds 108.5 dB. And now we're talking about the minimum. Of course, the more headroom we have, the more improvement we get in speaker response and so on. But that is not the question right here. Now we talked about dB loss. We will also need to talk about time difference, because when sound leaves the monitors at the same time, we see that those closest will reach our ear sooner than those most distant to us, because sound travels at the constant rate, and these are closer, so they will hit our ear before. Which means that in order to have the sound meet our ears at the same time from all angles, all the closer monitors must be delayed according to the distance. That is what we're going to do easily right now, still with the same numbers. What we do now is we use this one here, distance divided by 343, which talk about meters in a 20 degree Celsius room, times 1000, and we get the milliseconds. So again, I did explain it in the beginning of the video, but you don't need to understand it. Just put it into your calculator and you will get the results. I've labeled the speakers A, B, C, D here to make it more clear what I'm talking about. The A speaker is the one furthest away. So that is the one we are delaying the others to match. So this will automatically be 0. To get the distance number for the center speaker, we take the furthest away, the 2.5 minus 2.2. And then we get 0.3. So the difference in distance between these two speakers is 30 centimeters. Let's do the same math for the others. 2.5 minus 1.5, we get 1. And 2.5 minus 1.32, we get 1.18. So these are the numbers we are operating in when using this formula here. So let's do that. 0.3 divided by 343 times 1000 is 0.8 millisecond. So basically what that number means is that this speaker here must start 0.8 millisecond later than this one to get the sound reaching our ears at the same time at a constant speed. Let's do the same for the others. 1 divided by 343 times 1000 is 2.9 millisecond. And 1.18 divided by 343 times 1000 equals 3.4 millisecond. And then we have calculated the dB loss and the time delay for all speakers. What this lets us know there is what type of monitors we will need. I now learn that for the rear and side surrounds, I need to have speakers able to output more than 109 dB at 1 meter distance. And if you look at the monitor specs, you can actually see that number in this specs. Just be careful with that spec, because not all monitors are giving that number for one speakers. For instance, the Adam monitors are showing the number for a pair, which means that you need to actually reduce 3 dB because, yeah, doubling the power is 3 dB plus. So if a speaker expressed in pair says 114, actually it's 111 per speaker or something close to that. The front speakers, we need to be able to output no less than 113 dB. What is interesting here is also in terms of live sound that the same principles apply for live sound. For instance, in houses of worship or churches, we have arrays of speakers across the room so that everyone can hear the preach. You also need to time delay the speakers so that you don't get any phase issues in the room, because all speakers are playing the same sound at reaching the ear at different times. So we talked about 7.0. Now what about the LFE and bass management? Now the LFE and bass management does not have directly a degree or distance to be placed, because it depends on the room and how everything works together. And do you have one sub? Do you have 3? Are they nested? Are they used for LFE or for bass management? It all depends on the pressure management of your room and the physics. So when you know where you place your sub or LFE, bass management, whatever you want to call it, in your studio or home theater, then you can actually just take a measure tape and check the distance from the center position to that, and then you can use trigonometry or Pythagorean theorem to get the rest of the numbers. But that is why I didn't use them in this example here. Also for Dolby Atmos or a 3D DTS:X with height, any format with height monitors, you use the same principles, but you will also need to just take the triangles and shift them up to the vertical plane. So you do the same math, you just do it upwards instead of to the side. And in some cases you need to do both. So to calculate, for instance, the top left, right, top, you would actually need to have 2 triangles, one on the deviation to the side and one on the angle to the top. So we do exactly the same thing as we're done now, we just do it 2 times, one to the side and one up. Then we have the top speakers. Now, that was a nerdy version of speaker configuration and setup, and how to calculate for dB loss and how powerful of speakers you need in layman's term. and also the time delay you need to set up for them. Now, this is for people who want to do the math, who wants to use the calculator and gain that extra bit of control. Of course, you can just place them somewhere-ish, because when you have a degree that spans from one number to the other, as long as you're somewhere in between, you are doing correctly. But then you won't know what happens to the time management, for instance, or the dB management. You're also using the formulas for the dB calculation. You can also calculate beforehand, where you buy speakers. Will the speakers be strong enough for my room? So, for instance, I was looking at new monitors. I did the calculations according to my setup, and I could actually see that these monitors will do very well in this situation. These will not be powerful enough. I can't use them. And also for us planning bigger studios in the future, when we have the means to do so, we can also plan ahead. Okay, I see that my dream studio will be of this size. Then I can actually calculate what size that studio will be. And I can buy speakers that I already know by now will be able to manage that distance. Of course, there's always a lot of buts. In this case, speaker sounds different in different rooms. It's a really big matter of acoustics, pressure management, reflections, and so on. So you may want to change your speakers later down the road anyhow, but you at least, if they still work, you already have them, and they can manage an expanding studio until you have the means and funds to do what you want. So that's it for today. Let me know if you have any questions or requests for future episodes. Just hit me in the comments down below. If you appreciate this, please press like and share if you have anyone who could benefit from this information. And also feel free to hit that subscribe button and that bell button. And I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching. Cheers.